Hey everyone, how you doing today? My name's Kirsty, and today I'm talking you through books that I think are overhyped, underhyped, and got just about the right amount of hype. I want to preface this by saying my neighbour is doing some work out in his garden. It's been like 2 months of constant hammering and drilling and driving me crazy, but unfortunately I don't want to record at night, so we're just going to have to deal. So if you hear any background noise, I do apologise. It's not me. I really struggled how I was going to do this, because at first I thought I was going to do for each one find books that had sort of similar vibes and do a thing or similar themes. And then I was like, well, I really struggled. Apart from a few, I struggled to find ones that matched. So what I'm going to do is the ones that I did find sort of that were kind of collectively went well together, I will talk about those. And then I'm just going to do a list of these were overhyped, these were okay, these were underhyped and need more loving. We're going to look at the fantasy books that I think are the most overhyped and don't necessarily deserve the hype they. I'm kickstarting this with one that I feel is going to shock a lot of people, because it's one that I actually love with one of my all-time favourite authors, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I think it's overhyped. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, but I can see that it definitely is not the book that I see it promoted as a lot. A lot of people, when they were describing this book, were kind of focusing more on the things that it had the least amount of stuff in, and quite rightly people were upset and didn't get on with it. So I feel like it was overhyped because it was being promoted and pushed onto people wrong. So yeah, I feel like it was a little bit overhyped, even though I personally loved it, and I love Schwab. As we know, I have the Schwab shelf. Then we have one that probably no surprise to everyone, In the Lives of Puppets. I don't see why everyone was hyping this so much. It had a very lazy plot. The characters, this whole book felt lazy. The characters just felt like they were one-trick ponies and all they could do was this one thing. And I didn't feel there was adequate character growth. I didn't feel that it had a very good plot. And honestly, I don't see why this was so hyped. It was overhyped and it wasn't a very well-written book. It certainly wasn't his best. Then we have one that I feel was severely overhyped and did not deserve any of the hype that it got in any way, shape or form, and that is The Binding by Bridget Collins. The theory behind the book, fantastic. Binding people's memories in order for them to forget, I thought was genius. However, when it had like a romantic plot line, it was so boring and so kind of, she was so scared to write that plot line, and it was just like, oh my god, there was unnecessary animal abuse in there. There was just so much unnecessarily graphic detail about some of the things, and it's like, if it's graphic enough for people to want to not remember it, it's graphic enough for me to not want to read it, you know? I do not understand why this book got so much love and why people say it's one of the best books ever written, when I personally think it was abhorrent. And it was boring when it wasn't shocking me just for the shock factor. I didn't like it at all. Next up we have probably again, no one's surprise, The Love Hypothesis. Again, it might surprise you because if you have been around long enough, you know I gave it 5 stars. But I do feel it was overhyped, because at the end of the day, this was written as a fan fiction. You can tell it was a fan fiction. You can tell it was her first book. You can tell that it wasn't perfect. And as I've now discovered, I've now read 2 more books from Ali Hazelwood, or 1 more, and I've realised she is a one formula and done author, and I am done with this author. But I did love this one. However, I definitely feel it was overhyped. There are far better romances out there, and there are far more interesting relationships to read about out there. And then I'm going to end it with Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. I'm noticing this one starting to creep up more and more and more in people's recommendations and enjoyment videos, and again, I feel it's being overhyped. The main thing that I am seeing for it is either the dyslexia rep or the plus size rep. However, The dyslexia rep was done great. The ADHD rep, they did dirty, because there is a minor character in it with ADHD, and all they focused on were the bad things about ADHD, and they played up to the most damaging stereotypes for people with ADHD that they could. So thank you for that. Then also with the plus size rep, I hated the fact that this character was so obsessed about her own weight and people talking about her weight. It was just kind of, you're talking in one sentence about how you don't want to make things all about your weight, and then all you do is make things about your weight. And then she just really annoyed me very early on in the book when he was saying, the main lead, the male character was like, I need to go to the gym, do you want to come with me? Not in any way, shape or form saying because you're fat and need to exercise, but that's how she took it, and she went off on this guy, and I was like, whoa, rein it back. Unnecessary. And yeah, I don't feel that these are very good characters. I don't feel it was very good representation, and I thought the attitudes of all the characters sucked in this, so I think it was overhyped. Moving on to the series and books that I think have just enough hype and are well hyped, and I agree with the hype that they are getting, and I support it, I back it, and I love it. Starting off with none other than Heartstopper. This series deserves all the hype it gets and even more. I wish it would get even more hype. It just, the show, the books, everything about this is just so wholesome and beautiful and wonderful and real. It's real portrayals of teenagers in real situations. There is a huge problem I find in the YA industry of authors writing teenagers but forgetting what teenagers actually think and act like. And it comes off as either, the teenagers come off as either feeling very young for their age or too mature, and this had the perfect balance. I wish when I was a teenager that there was a book like this around, because I would have realised my own sexualities and my own, what I considered to be quirks and flaws. I would have embraced them far sooner had I read this when I was a teenager and been accepted for who I am way quicker. Next up, we have The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. This absolutely deserves all of the hype, and I feel it is a book that should be brought into the curriculum, because yes, in the UK we don't have gun ownership and we have very strict gun laws, but I still feel it is really important to get perspectives from other people and to get other cultures and other countries and their perspectives and what they live through. And this in particular highlighting the problem with corruption and racism within police forces, because it is very endemic here as well. But it also will be an eye-opener for what it's like to live as an American teen, having that concern and that fear and that worry. But I just thought this was such a powerful book, and whether you are, no matter where you are in the world, it is one that I feel should be taught in schools. And it did give a lot of awareness, and it made me understand a lot more about what it's like to live as a teen in a country where there are guns and gangs and drugs and living in the heart of that kind of environment. Yeah, just as you can tell, this book is so well hyped and needs more. Next up, we have Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This one, all three of these books were fantastic for disability rep, and also we have like plus size rep as well, and just there is so much rep. There is like BIPOC rep, there is disability rep, plus size rep. I just loved it. I loved all three of these books, and I don't like the smutty scenes in the books. We all know that, but everything else about these books I really love, and especially for Chloe Brown. This one was probably the one that resonated the most with me, as well as like Eve Brown hit me for the autism, and did hit me very hard. But Chloe Brown, where she describes what it's like living with chronic pain and her flare-ups and that fatigue, I was just like, this is me. And it kind of helped me to understand some stuff about myself, and definitely so hyped. This entire series is just fantastic and needs all the love it gets. Then we have the Legendborn series by Tracy Deonn. This is one of the best series for retellings, as well as lore building and interweaving different cultures and different stories together. And honestly, it's got fantastic characters, fantastic world building. It's very, very, very heavy on the info dump when we first start in Legendborn. And I did find that a struggle to get through. But when I reread it, it was so, so good. And it's just been... It definitely deserves every single bit of hype that it gets. I'm still slightly uncomfortable with the character's ages, where she's 16 being pursued by college men. Not really a fan of that. And yeah, it's one of my favourites. It's got demons, it's got all sorts, and yeah, definitely well worth the hype. Then there's one that actually I DNF'd this book, but I think it's deserving of the hype it gets, and that is Priory of the Orange Tree. I got to about page 180 or something like that, maybe not even that, and I DNF'd because it was just far too much with the world building for my tastes. I love world building, but I am very much a plot and character driven girly, and for me, world building shouldn't take over the plot and shouldn't take over the characters. It should be it should be like more balanced and woven in, and sort of like we learn about the world through the plot and through the characters. And this one, I just found it was kind of like reading a textbook, and I didn't enjoy it. However, I can appreciate how well developed this world is. I can appreciate how much love and effort has gone into building this beautiful dynamic world, and so I will never fault that. And I do think it does deserve the hype it gets from what I read. It just wasn't for me personally. But then one that I did absolutely love, I've read it twice now, 5 stars both times, made me tear up both times and full on cry the first time, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, because this one does do that thing. It weaves in the world building and the culture so beautifully with the characters. It has a lot of diversity in here. It shows different types of people from the Latin community, and it was just so well written. And I loved how it brought in like the story of Xibalba and all of the way that it connects to what's going on now. There were just so many different aspects in this, and it's queer. It was just trans author, trans narrator on the audiobook, trans main character, gay main character, just all the diversity. I love it. And we have got a sequel coming out, and I will be hyping the shit out of that. You can bet your bonny butts. And then the final one that I'm going to talk about is one I haven't finished the series, but I'm so glad that Ren basically forced me to read it, and I'm now 2 books in and loving it, and that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I've done a complete 180 on this. I've gone from thinking, why do people love this so much? It's so boring and I don't understand what's going on, to I totally get why people love this so much. I still don't know what the hell is going on, but I am here for the ride, and the characters are some of my all-time favourites already, and I'm only in book 2. Just Ronan has my heart, and so does Adam. And Noah. I'm not so bothered about Gansey and Blue, they can kind of just toddle off, but those 3, they are my boys, they have my heart, and Chainsaw is the cutest little raven ever. So I definitely understand the hype. I'm still a little bit confused about what the actual plot is, and this is one where I do feel like we needed a little bit more information about what the hell things are that they're looking for. But I also understand it's one where you're supposed to learn as you go, so it's kind of like we're learning at the same rate that Blue is. And it's like, while I appreciate that, but I also hate it so much. But this series, I'm definitely getting back on board with the hype train. And then finally, I'm going to be talking about books and series that I feel don't get enough hype. And I'm kickstarting with a romance only because it's still at the ARC stage, but I've not heard anyone talking about it yet, and I feel when it does come out, it needs all the hype because it's going to be incredibly hyped. But currently is underhyped is Under Your Spell by Laura Wood. This is singularly one of the best romances I have ever read. I was in love with all of the characters. I loved all the sisters and their dynamic with each other. I loved the insecurities in here. And I'm discovering that maybe I actually do like rockstar romances, because I've read a few now and I've loved each and every one of them, even though I kept telling myself I didn't. And I was like, it's not my thing. And yet, this one definitely deserves the hype. It's so well written. It had me laughing out loud. It had me crying. I resonated far too much for my own comfort to the main character. But it was just such a solid read. 5 stars all the way, and definitely it comes out in June this year, and I recommend every single one of you pre-order it, especially if you like romance. Then we have another one that I haven't yet completed the series of. However, we all know I talk about it all the time on this friggin' channel, and I will never stop promoting it because it's still not hyped enough, and that is The Great Coats by Sebastian de Castell. Oh, I did that all in one go. Wow. I forget to breathe sometimes. But this follows the Greatcoats, who are the magistrates for the king. The king has been killed. They were basically made to blame for it, and they are now dishonoured and disavowed, but they are basically just trying their best. Then this like big conspiracy thing comes out, and it leads to the 3 of them going and trying to fix everything. But I can't really say much because there's just a lot of spoilers if I try. But I will just say this is a brotherhood that I would die for. And it just has such good storytelling. Falkio is, if you like emos, if you like characters that are a little bit emo-y and that sometimes they're the best character ever and then other times they're whiny little bitches that you just want to punch in the face, you want this one. Kest, without meaning to be funny, is the funniest character, and then Brasty, who does mean to be funny, just provides some of the best comic relief moments, and the dynamic between Kest and Brasty is one of my favourites I've ever seen. And just, it's so, so good. So if you like a fantasy with really good world building, politics, a family dynamic, a little bit of an outcast underdog story, you want this series. Then we have 16 Souls by Rosie Talbot. This one is a contemporary paranormal and is YA, but it has some of the best disability rep I've ever seen, and it just doesn't get the hype it deserves, and I need more people to read this. It is delicious. But Charlie, the main character, is a bilateral amputee who is also a seer and can see ghosts, and he meets another guy who is also a seer, and they realise that the ghosts in the city of York are disappearing, and now it's their job to try and find out what's going on, and it leads to unveiling some really big revelations and secrets and things like that. I just loved the entire cast in this. Again, we have so much diversity and so much rep, and it's not really talked about because we have got disability rep, not only in the form of an amputee and a ambulatory wheelchair user, we also have some deaf rep in here, we have mental health, we have LGBT rep because they are both queer, and we have trans rep, and we have gay rep. We just have so much rep, and no one's talking about this book, or I'm not seeing it. So pick it up. Going back to fantasy, we have the Ace of Shades. So this is the Shadow Game series by Amanda Foody. I feel like this needs to be more hyped. Again, there's quite a bit of rep because Levi, one of the main characters, is bisexual. He is also a BIPOC character, and this is just such a interesting magic system because it's linked to the blood, and basically your family bloodline determines what abilities you have. So we have N Salter, and the Salter bloodline are known as dancers, and their talent is to dance. And there's other bloodlines as well, but whatever your sort of main bloodline and then your minor bloodlines are, that determines what you can do and your abilities, but also determines your standing. And I just found that really fascinating to watch unfold. There's also a gang dynamic. There's multiple gangs in this city, and N I love as a character because she goes from this like really sweet, naive, innocent, gullible girl, and then I'm now on about to start the 3rd book. I've been saying that for 3 years, don't judge me. But in the 3rd book, she's this absolute badass, and watching that development, and then watching Levi go from being this really suave, confident, no one's gonna touch him type to this really insecure, uncertain of what's going on, trying to just get by. And just everything in this has got so much fun, and yet I don't think I've ever heard anybody else talk about it. And it is a slightly older series now. I think it's like 2018, 2019, something like that. But I just think it's so, so good, and I cannot wait to read the final. I also can wait because it's going to break me. And then the final one for this video is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nyan. I don't feel this one's hyped enough because it's got beautiful writing, a great cast of characters, and is a story following a girl who has been ripped from her home and everything she's ever known to become the concubine of the emperor, and he will have her in whatever way he deems. And it does show, like, she manages to avoid being picked by him for a while, but when she does, she freaks out, she panics, she fights him. It doesn't end well. And it's this story of her going from being absolutely terrified and lost and going through this abuse and this trauma to then meeting and falling in love with another woman that's one of the other concubines, and the pair of them finding a way to cope through this tragedy together. And then in book 2, it kind of shows them trying to overcome their PTSDs, and there's some more stuff that's been woven in but I can't talk about with spoilers. But honestly, don't read it if you are particularly prone to triggers with sexual assault and rape and things like that. It's a very tender story as well as being very empowering, and I have been loving this series. So yeah, that is a longer than planned video on the books that I think are overhyped, perfectly hyped, or hyped just enough. Not enough. Let me know in the comments if you agree with any of these thoughts, and even if you disagree, feel free to tell me. Just be kind and polite about it. And yeah, what are some of the books that you think deserve far more hype than they currently get? Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe if you want to get more content from me. I hope you're all good. I hope you're staying safe, and until next time, bye.